fellas, lady fellas, everyone in our society, welcome to the Fantasy and Reality Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Tacker. Today in the ridiculously over-decorated studio, we're going to go over Week 1 recaps. So the first thing we want to do is go over the wins and losses. So far, I believe I am 10-5. Not too bad. 2/3 of my games are right, so not all that bad. So for the teams that won, the Buccaneers beat the Panthers, the Patriots beat the Dolphins, the Ravens beat the Cardinals, the Packers beat the Vikings, the 49ers beat the Bengals, the Lions beat the Chargers, the Texans beat the Jaguars, the Seahawks beat the Steelers, the Colts beat the Titans, the Chiefs beat the Raiders, the Rams beat the Saints, the Cowboys beat the Redskins, the Bears beat the Broncos, and the Falcons in Sunday Night Football beat the Eagles. Tonight, we have the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. Sam Darnold still isn't playing. We'll see how they do there. As far as the injury report goes, I'll have that in tomorrow's video for the Waiver Wire Wednesday preparation, so that way you can know who's injured, who you need to pick up, who you should be looking out for. So as far as the best performances in fantasy football this week, at the quarterback position, we have Patrick Mahomes, obviously. He went 30 for 44 for 443 yards and 4 touchdowns. Next, we have Lamar Jackson, who went 24 for 37, 272 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Dak Prescott, 26 for 30, 269 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Tom Brady, 20 for 28, 264 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Russell Wilson, 29 for 35, 300 yards even, and 3 touchdowns. Other great quarterback performances, we had Jimmy Garoppolo, Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Matt Ryan, and Andy Dalton to round out the top 10 for Week 2 fantasy in quarterbacks. Now for running backs, we had Dalvin Cook with 20 attempts, 154 yards, a touchdown, 3 receptions, and 37 yards receiving. Next we have Aaron Jones, who surprisingly had 23 carries for 116 yards, a touchdown, 4 receptions, and 34 yards. Third, we have Raheem Mostert, who was a surprise guy to do so well so early, but he had 13 attempts for 83 yards, 3 receptions for 68 yards, and a receiving touchdown. Next, we had Austin Eckler, who had 17 attempts, 66 yards, a touchdown, 6 receptions, 67 yards. Next, we have Saquon Barkley, who had 18 touches for 107 yards, a touchdown, 3 receptions for 28 receiving yards. Other running backs doing well in Week 2 are Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, Kerryon Johnson, Frank Gore, and surprisingly enough, Peyton Barber rounded out the top 10. As far as the top receivers for Week 2, we had Demarcus Robinson killing the game with 6 receptions, 172 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Next, we have Emmanuel Sanders coming back, 11 receptions, 98 yards, and a touchdown. We had Julio Jones coming back at the end with 5 receptions, 106 yards, and 2 touchdowns. We had Chris Godwin taking all of Mike Evans and O.J. Howard's targets and receptions. He had 8 receptions, 121 yards, and a touchdown. We had Kenny G, Smooth Kenny Galladay, had 8 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. Surprising as it is, we have Nelson Aguilar up here with 8 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown. A lot of these guys had 8 receptions, but they did a lot with it. Like Calvin Ridley is next, 8 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown. The only guy up here without a touchdown is Tyler Boyd. He had 10 receptions for 122 yards. Now, the next guy is John Ross, who has done fantastic for his first year back as his new self. So he had 4 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown. So he didn't have a lot of receptions, but he did a whole lot with it. Next, we have Deebo Samuel with 5 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Other great wide receiver performances, we had Michael Thomas coming in at 11. He had an okay game, but still had enough to be number 11. We had DJ Chark, DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, Keenan Allen, Cooper Kupp, Devontae Adams, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, and Marquise Goodwin, surprisingly enough, rounded out the top 20 of the receivers. So for good tight end performances, number 1, not all that surprising, we had Mark Andrews. He had 8 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown. Next, we have Kelsey, also not surprising, with 7 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown. We had old Vance Dance finally come through. Even though everyone's hurt, his quarterback's out for the year, he still put on a nice performance. He had 7 for 30 for 2 touchdowns. Not a lot of yards, but a lot of touchdowns, which is good, because touchdowns are worth more than yards, usually. Next, we have Will Disley coming back from his injury with 5 receptions for 50 yards and 2 touchdowns. Then we have Zach Ertz, the only top guy without a touchdown. He had 8 for 72. So he caught a lot of balls and had a decent amount of yardage. No touchdowns, but he still did decent for his team. Came up literally a bit short in the 4th down that could have got them closer to winning the game last night, but that's how football goes sometimes. Other great tight end performances this week were Greg Olsen, Jason Witten, Darren Waller, Eric Ebron, and Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram started a bit on the shaky side, but then came back strong and ended with barely double-digit points. Now, the most disappointing performances, we have a huge list from every position. So I'll just rattle them off. These are guys that are either going to perform poorly the whole season, got injured, or something happened and it's just a fluke week. So we have Eli Manning, Kirk Cousins, Cam Newton, Ryan Fitzpatrick, unfortunately Drew Brees, unfortunately Big Ben Roethlisberger. We have Mitch Trubisky, Deshaun Watson surprisingly, Derek Carr didn't have a great week, Phillip Rivers not so much, Christian McCaffrey disappointed me very much, so hopefully he can bounce back. We have Marlon Mack, Damian Williams, and LaShawn McCoy each went out with a small injury, so we'll see how that plays out. Devonta Freeman, unfortunately, again, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, kind of surprisingly enough, Jordan Howard, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Deshaun Jackson, Alshon Jeffrey, Dante Moncrief, not that surprising, Devontae Parker, also not surprising, Dante Pettis, not surprising, another guy, Dede Westbrook, Anthony Miller, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and Adam Humphries, Kiki QT, Josh Gordon, kind of surprisingly, not surprising with AB coming back and being the top guy, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Robert Woods, Jimmy Graham, TJ Hockenson, unfortunately, Virgil Green taking over for Hunter Henry, didn't have a great game because Phillip Rivers was kind of shaky, even though Keenan Allen had a good game. Trey Burton, Kyle Rudolph, Jared Cook, and Vernon Davis each had kind of sketchy games. Vernon Davis had an eye injury, but he came back, so he should be good to go for the next week. So these are guys, like I said, either they're injured like Drew or Big Ben or Shady, Damian Williams, a few guys like that, or they just had, hopefully, anomaly-type weeks like Christian McCaffrey, Deshaun Jackson, Phillip Rivers, Kirk Cousins, guys that Josh Gordon, that could have a bounce-back week and continue on to be fine, and other guys that are probably not going to be valuable the entire season, like Eli Manning, Jordan Howard, Dante Moncrief, Devontae Parker, guys like that, possibly Jimmy Graham, maybe Adam Humphries. So, there's guys that could have a bounce-back week, but these guys, right at the end, I don't believe are going to be valuable the entire season. But you never know, things can happen. So just keep all these guys that had poor performances that are actually going to continue playing, keep them on the radar because they might have a bounce back game. These injured guys, you might want to go look at their backups like Shady and Damian Williams might not play. So Darwin Thompson could be a guy that you can look at. Maybe Teddy Bridgewater if you're looking for a few weeks. In a super flex, Rudolph, who is Big Ben's backup, so he's going to be the starter. I'll get more to that in the waiver wire Wednesday prep, but just pay close attention to guys who are scheduled to have hopefully a bounce back week like Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey, guys like that need to propel themselves back from having such a poor performance in week 2. So that was a bit of a quick recap of week 2, the best and worst guys in fantasy for the week. So like I said, keep monitoring on those injuries. I'll have hopefully a full injury report for the waiver wire, and then guys that you can hopefully pick up that should be killer for your team or at least help in depth or at least some kind of way, So as always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. Leave your questions, topic suggestions, comments down there in the comment section below. We'll get to everything that you have, answer it as well as we can, give you the best advice that we possibly can give you. And remember that sports is supposed to be enjoyed together. So please watch it, tell someone about us. We want to grow the community as much as possible. And in order to do that, you got to smash that thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, so we can keep trying to give you as much content as possible all the time. So, lastly, I'll leave you with God bless America and God bless fantasy football. Take care.